So I have to start by saying that, I just listened to all of the speeches, the lectures, the TED Talks already, and it's really impressive because you all are doing this work, and I'm really excited to be working with New York because 2014 is a year that I get to actually start to do some more consistent work with young folks, and I haven't had a chance to do as consistent work with young folks, meaning like middle school age. So I've been doing a lot of work with college students and young adults, people who are starting out in their careers over the last few years, even though when I started my career path, and I'll talk about that in a minute because it's not really a path, it's more of a winding road. But when I started that, I did a lot of work with young folks, and so it's really great to be back doing this. And I was really excited by the opportunity that Aaron and Emily have given me, and Justin, who you'll meet later today, given us to be a part of the New York relaunch with Laura. So that's just really exciting, and we're hoping that we'll have a school soon so that we can really get going. All right, so that's just all by way of introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea of cultivating the CEO, the 21st century CEO. And this is something I kind of came up with, but I think it works. So this right here, that's my father. It's my dad. And that picture was taken not far from where we're standing right now. It's taken on 13th and V Street back in the early 1980s. So I had the pleasure and the fortune of watching my father start his own business, his own engineering firm, when I was really young. So I must have been 7, 8 years old when he struck out on his own, started his business, and I believe that picture is taken roughly about the time he first opened up shop. And so I spent years and years with him in that office, watching him do what he did. I watched the passion that he had for his work. I went with him all over this city, into Maryland, Virginia, and saw him do his work. And I can't tell you how important that was for me as a young person to see, not just because he's my father, but to see someone have that kind of what I call creative agency over their lives. They were able to not only create their schedule, but they were able to really have some real autonomy and some real say in the work that they did in the world. So that shaped, for me at a very young age, some of what I wanted to see in my own work, in my own life. Now, I knew I wasn't going to be an engineer like my dad. I didn't have that particular aptitude. But I knew that I wanted to have the kind of enthusiasm that he had for his work. Yet and still, the years go by, I find myself in college one night, and I call my dad, and I'm like, I really envy you. Because the reality is, here I am as I finish my college years, and I don't know what I want to do. I feel really lost right now. And I was blown away by what he said to me in response. He said, Dax, the career that you might be being prepared for may not even exist right now. And in my father's way, he sent me a series of books the next few days that kind of helped me think about it a little bit more. But the reality was, I just didn't really have much clarity. So I spent the next few years waiting for those clouds to part. It's the clouds up there. And yes, and that's not me, so in case you're wondering, no. So what I did was I ended up traveling around the country and then ultimately going to other continents to speak to people who had chosen unconventional life paths, right? Because I wanted to talk to them and find out what it was they did, how did they make sense of it? And ultimately I wrote this book called Beat of a Different Drum, which Aaron, on every occasion he possibly has, is constantly passing out and wants me to write an updated version of, and maybe I will one day. But the point of the matter was that I tried to capture what these people had taught me along that journey. And yet and still, even after I wrote this book, whenever people asked me what I did for a living, I still struggled. I didn't have a complete answer. Well, I had a law degree, and I did some work in that area, and I love basketball, and I love working with young people, and I was a writer, and that was my passion, but I didn't have anything to really tie it together. And so I really struggled with that for a very long time. And you might even know people who actually are that way, or have a hard time defining what it is they do in the world. And then one day, I was issuing my standard boilerplate response to the what do I do for a living question when a friend of mine pulled me aside and said, hold up, not only do you sound like you're lacking a little confidence, you're selling yourself short, because the reality is that all the things that you do have value, and they all reinforce one another. In fact, you're good at one thing because, not in spite of, because of the other things that you do. And then she laid something on me that I had never really thought about or heard. She said, what you really need to develop is a both-and frame. A both-and frame. And I was like, whoa, that's deep. You know, and then we started to talk a little bit more, and it really occurred to me, and I knew this already, but it occurred to me on a deeper level that in many ways, my own education, and I believe a lot of our educations and our socialization process in this country and throughout the world, tends to put us on a particular kinds of path. So if you think about it, our parents and our peers are often pressuring us indirectly and directly to make choices around our careers that will suit their expectations of what we should be doing in the world. The same goes for the college process. I work with a lot of college students, and the thing that blows me away is that I'm meeting first-year students who have already chosen their majors. I'm like, whoa, how did that happen? And they, in fact, had already applied to college with the major in mind. And I'm like, that is part of the new paradigm. And part of that has to do with the fact that universities recognize that that influences retention. So the data is saying that when students decide on their majors earlier, they'll stay in college earlier. But yet and still, that does have some sort of offshoots. And then beyond that, when we're applying for jobs and we're thinking about our career paths, college counselors and those who are helping us with our resumes are always warning us that, you know, employers, they bristle a little bit when they see too many experiences or too many interests on our resume. So they're often telling us to make sure that there's a consistent thread or trajectory that can help define what it is we do in the world. And all that can be really challenging, especially, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, because I am submitting that I think we need to really think about how we are preparing young folks to live in a both-and world. And so, given the fact that we are operating in a society where specialization is becoming part of the norm, I'm going to ask you to indulge me just for a moment. So, the Bureau of Labor Statistics did a study back in 2012 of the youngest baby boomers, those born between 1957 and 1964. And what they found is that between the ages of 18 and 46, they had roughly 11.3 jobs on average, right? And these are the youngest baby boomers. And why that's important is because that was the last generation that could confidently expect to have a standard of living that was higher than their parents. That was the last generation that could confidently expect to have career advancement that wasn't necessarily tied to a college education. That was, in large measure, the last generation that could rely on strong union-backed employment that would protect them. And so now we live in a whole new society. We all know that. We're all living in it. We're all experiencing it. And it's a new economy. I saw one statistic recently that said that the millennials, those people with ages 21 to 31, and they may give or take a few years in there, can expect to have between 15 and 20 jobs in their lifetime. 15 and 20 jobs. And moreover, the kinds of protections and the expectations that we've had, previous generations have had, I should say, around employment just aren't there. So the expectation of a 20-year, a 30-year, or even a 40-year career in a particular place of employment are scarce, increasingly unattainable, and maybe even not so desirable. Maybe not even so desirable. Because it is the reality that there are more options for people. And so people are thinking more creatively about what they want to do in the world. Those who are finding success realize that they have to get more education or that they have to pursue multiple career paths at once even. And in fact, what we've discovered now in the study that came out in 2011 from the Career Advisory Board, they discovered that millennial workers, those between the ages of 21 and 31, have already seized and recognized that in order for them to be successful, they're going to need to have higher education. We all know that. That's pretty standard. But they also need to obtain transferable skills, have a variety of jobs, and, as I point out, experience multiple career paths. Moreover, the definition of success continues to evolve. So these younger workers are defining success by not only what they're making, but the impact that they're having and the desire to have those happen in the same space and time. Not either or, a both and. So we're doing a pretty good job with higher education. You know, contrary to what we might be hearing, between 1990 and 2000, we saw about a 10% jump in student enrollment in higher education, degree-granting institutions. Between 2000 and 2010, that percentage jumped 37%. So we're doing something right. We are shifting and gearing people towards higher education, and that's wonderful, and that's important, and that's great. But the question I have and the challenge that I'm posing today is, to what extent are we preparing young people to enter a workforce in which they're going to be expected to shift, adapt, and be able to maintain multiple careers, perhaps even at once? I was looking recently at some of the work that, some of the work that's out there on the new economy that we operate within. And so there's these new terms that are arising. One of those is the hyphenates, or the slashers, or the gig economy. These are all new kinds of workers, and by some estimates, they account for 1 in 3 Americans in the workforce, 42 million people. Those are people who are not working in quote-unquote traditional job spaces. That's hugely important to think about, because as we think about our own young folks, what does it mean if this generation, those in their 20s and their 30s, are already experiencing this hyphenated or slash career experience? What's going to happen for the next generation that comes along as well? Moreover, this past fall, a Canadian employment site, Workopolis, published the top 10 new jobs that didn't even exist or barely existed 10 years ago. So we can see this list: social media online community manager, mobile applications developer, a user experience designer, search engine optimization specialist, sustainability expert, elder care services coordinator, blogger, web content strategist, yoga, Zumba, Pilates instructor, big data analyst, and privacy officer. These are jobs that by and large didn't exist 10 years ago. And they're hot jobs, places where people are making good livings. And yet a lot of them operate within this sort of hybrid economy, this gig economy as we were talking about. And so all that leads me to the CEO Bootcamp, this experience that we're talking about, this really exciting opportunity. Because the reality is, and this is something the Gallup poll in 2011 discovered, was that 77% of young people between the ages, or I should say between 5th and 12th grade, have already identified as their goal in life to be a boss. They want to run something, 77%. And 45% want to start their own business. But there's a disconnect here. The disconnect is in part because the schools aren't actually teaching the kinds of skills that will lead someone to be an entrepreneur. And beyond that, this Census Bureau indicates that there are only about 2,100,000 quote-unquote CEOs in the world, in America, I should say. So if you look at that percentage-wise, that's about 0.7% of our population. So about 0.7% of our population, in the conventional sense, will be a CEO. But all is not lost, rest assured, because what we have the power to do is to help young folks develop what I would call the CEO mindset. And we believe this camp experience, this boot camp experience, can really drive home. And what do we know about CEOs? We know CEOs have to be adaptable. We know CEOs have to be creative and forward-thinking. We know they have to be great communicators. We know all these things about what it is required to be a good leader of an organization. And so we can take that stuff and we can transfer that stuff to our young people through this camp experience. So over the course of an intensive week, our plan, our vision is to have young folks in the space together, learning about personal finance, entrepreneurship, learning about goal setting, team building, learning about leadership. Moreover, having the opportunity to be in spaces where they're solving real problems, real world problems, and being challenged to think critically. And then on top of that, on a daily basis, being introduced to leaders in various industries, going out, interviewing, seeing these people in action. And that's huge, seeing them in action. Not just hearing them talk about it, but seeing them do what it is they do in the world. I want to close by just circling back to this idea of the both and. Because I look at all of us out here as we're sitting in this room, and we're in Washington, D.C. in this really comfortable space, and we have the opportunity to come to a retreat and learn about our work and talk about our work, and that's really powerful and important. I imagine that most of you on some level have chosen the work that you do because you get to have an impact, you get to experience purpose and meaning in the work that you do, but you also get to have some creative autonomy. You get to come up with new ways to reach your young people. And that is the thing that we want to be able to translate in this both and context to the people that young people we're working with. We want them to recognize this and see this as they come of age in what I see. And what I see is a both-and society, where we're not asking people to choose between either or, but to really express the multiplicity of selves. How are we preparing them for that? And moreover, how are we placing them on a path such that when it does come time for them to make choices about their careers, they have an array of options that are available to them, but moreover, they're able to choose and create the one that works for them. All this hopefully will begin to happen at this camp experience, and we know this won't all happen there. But if we can begin to drill down there and carry some of this stuff forward, we believe that really this can start to contribute to what the development of the CEO mindset is, and really prepare them to live in a society where a whole new range of skills and aptitudes are being called upon to be successful. So that is all I have to share with you, and I thank you for your time. My name is Dax Devlin Ross. I'm a consultant with the New York City relaunch that's happening right now at After School All-Stars. CEO is an acronym for Career Explorations Opportunities. So self-explanatory at that point. So the idea is that young folks need to be exposed to a range of different career opportunities. And the way we can do that at a young age is by showing them some of the people that are around them that are doing the kinds of work that might be of interest to them and might be work that they've never heard of or maybe never really experienced in their own lives. So the CEO is an acronym for, again, Career Exploration Opportunities. So it's a variety of opportunities that happen within the camp experience. So they'll not only have people come to them, they're actually gonna go out into the world, into New York City, and they're gonna go meet with CEOs in various industries. So we plan to choose a number of different kinds of industry leaders to really tap into. So there's a network of folks already there that are excited about this program, excited about After School All-Stars, and we expect to have young folks interviewing them, coming prepared to talk, to ask questions, but also to get a chance to see people do what they do, because I think that's a huge part of it. Often young folks have the experience of someone coming to speak to them about what their work is, but what we wanted them to also have the experience of is seeing someone in their element, seeing them actually do what it is they do. It's a unique program, and it's got some great leadership. It's got some great people involved. I mean, the staff here is, I like working with this staff because they're enthusiastic. They're folks who work with kids, not just talk about working with kids. It's a big difference. So I think that's one of the things that makes After School All-Stars a unique program, is that you have people who themselves come from a range of backgrounds. They're based all over the country, and they have a real genuine love for young people and want to see them excel and are opening up opportunities for them to explore who they are and what they do. So it's a really special program. The points that I want to make, and I hope to drive home, are that we live in a different society than even 10, 15 years ago. And the way we talk about work and the way we talk about career should also be advancing as society is evolving. To that end, my presentation and the way I'm talking about this career exploration opportunity is through the lens of how can young folks experience more than one career path as a real and tangible reality that they might have to experience in their life and their work. So in my own work, I have a number of different careers that I am involved in. And I find that a lot of the people that I am friends with, and a lot of my peers also have that. They're experiencing what we call like a multiplicity of careers happening at once. So what does it mean to prepare a new generation to live and work in a society where the expectation of working in the same job, in the same organization, in the same company for 20, 30, or 40 years isn't there anymore? We don't have that kind of society anymore. We have a society in which you have people who are called hyphenates or slashers, or people who are members of what's called the gig economy. And there are 42 million people who are working in this new sort of employment landscape where they're changing the rules around work, changing the relationship that they have with employers, changing their own titles and how they interact with the world as people, as working people. So I wanted to stress that as something that we need to talk to middle school students about, not something that we should only be talking to college and high school students about, because what happens is when you come out of college, and what I see happening over and over again is people come out of college with the expectation that there's a career waiting for them, when in fact they have to create it. And if we can get young folks in the middle school years to recognize that if it is the case that they want to be entrepreneurs, if they want to be leaders of business and enterprise, that they should be preparing themselves to explore and expand and develop a range of skills that will help facilitate that in life. And that might mean it's not a clear linear path. It might mean that it's sort of circuitous and it might not make sense to your family, and it might feel like you're sort of a fish out of water sometimes, but if you are preparing yourself for that, it will make sense and you'll be better prepared to exist, and I believe, in the society we're moving towards. One of the statistics that I think is really important to share is comes from a recent Gallup poll on young people, in fact, and it found that 77% of 5th through 12th graders want to be their own boss, and 45% want to be entrepreneurs. And yet, on the flip side, there aren't many personal finance or entrepreneurship classes that are offered in schools. So where are they going to get this? If they have this aspiration and yet we don't create a foundation for that in their education, how does it happen? And I believe that's where After School All-Stars can really come in and bridge that gap. They become the kind of program that can build those personal finance skills, build those entrepreneurship skills. And I think that's going to do a lot and go a long way to help prepare young people to be successful in this new world. I think what's important as well is that we value the people who work at After School All-Stars as entrepreneurs, because what I hear consistently and I'm seeing in my interactions with the staff are people who are developing ideas and developing programs within their specific chapters. And that's an example, and those are examples of entrepreneurship. So there's entrepreneurship, which is the development of ideas from scratch, the new ideas, but entrepreneurship is the development of ideas within an existing program. And a lot of the people who I see working in After School All-Stars are doing that. And that's why After School All-Stars continues to be a dynamic program, because there's space for the people who work there to help create and redefine what the organization is doing within the specific mission of supporting young people. What's happening with the New York relaunch is really exciting, because New York has, obviously it's an enormous place, it's an enormous opportunity. And for a number of years, After School All-Stars has existed in Queens. The only borough that has existed has been Queens. And what we're doing right now is expanding the reach of the program to other boroughs. Specifically, we're focusing on Brooklyn right now, and we expect to also focus on Manhattan, and hopefully in the future, expand outward to the Bronx as well, and even potentially to Staten Island. But it's the idea that taking one school this year as a pilot school so that funders and that kids and that schools can begin to see what After School All-Stars is doing. And we're going to run a Camp Hoop Heroes version of the Camp Hoop Heroes experience. We're going to run the CEO Boot Camp. We're going to have some programming at a particular site so that folks can see what it is After School All-Stars is doing nationally, and that New York can really begin to, develop its potential. All the potential in the world exists there because so many of our funding partners are there. We have a strong board that's already in place. And what we need right now is to really start to mobilize the schools and mobilize the sort of ground team that can really grow it there. And that's what our job is to do the next 6 to 7 months. We have a lot of relationships already in New York, so it's not that the relationships don't exist. We need as a base, and what we're developing as a base of operations. And the idea is that you develop one base of operations, and that can begin to be a sort of a laboratory that others can see, experience, and then begin to build from there. So as I get older myself, as I mature in my career, I have found that personally, I have worked less and less with young people, less and less direct service work. I find myself, and I'm speaking sort of candidly here, working more with college students and working more with younger adults who are recent college graduates. And I genuinely believe personally that it's important to be connected to middle school age, high school age students as well, because it's very easy to fall into a trap of talking about what's happening and not really being engaged with what's happening. So personally, I have a real selfish sort of desire to work with young people that's being fulfilled through my work here. But also, I think I get to work with people who I really enjoy being around. I think that you really can't overstate how valuable it is to work in an environment and work around people who are excited about their work, who are positive and who care. And then, obviously, it's the opportunity to be around a new generation of folks, meaning the middle school students that we, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that we are highly focused on, and to hear what's going on with them, to be a part of their lives, and to learn from them. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I used to be a middle school teacher, and some of my greatest growth happened when I was teaching 7th grade English and got a chance to not just listen to what was going on in the music or see what's happening in the pop culture scene, but to really get an idea of what it is they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. You hear politicians talk about it. We hear a lot of people, experts, claiming they're experts, talk about it. But I think it's also really important to just have a hands-on interaction and hands-on experience with it. So for me, it's really being there in the trenches and knowing what's going on and continuing to give back in that way too. I mean, I think the middle school age is often one it's a period that's often overlooked. The reality is that if you think about it, even when I was starting my teaching career, a lot of folks wanted to teach at high school or they wanted to teach elementary. Because the middle school years is like, I don't want to deal with them kids because they don't know what they are at that point. They're going through adolescence. They still don't want to, they want to be grown, but they're still young. So often I think less emphasis is placed on that age group. And I think it's really unfortunate. And I think why After School All-Stars is also really important is because it's honing in on that particular age group that is, again, often overlooked. And then I think some of the better quality teachers and educators will gravitate towards high school or gravitate towards early elementary education. And After School All-Stars' importance because of the professional staff, because of the folks that are really engaged and excited about their work. Doing this work with that age group makes a huge difference. My best day at After School All-Stars has to be the final day of the Camp Hoop Heroes that we ran in Miami last year, in 2013, in the spring. Having the opportunity to see all of these young folks that we worked with throughout the course of the week gather together for this award ceremony and for this final banquet. And they got a chance to also create cards for the people that had supported them. So they got a chance to write cards to all the Miami Heat organization that had donated space and donated so much in order to make it work. So to see the kind of gratitude from the young kids and from the staff that we had worked with in Miami was really powerful because we started that week not really knowing what would happen. We were kind of nervous because we had never run the camp in Miami. And to see it go off so well and to see so many kids come back on a daily basis excited and to have built the kind of relationships that we were able to build and over the course of 5 days was really powerful. So that last day of camp was my best day working with After School All-Stars. The advice that I would give to someone who's just starting out at After School All-Stars would be to listen and to embrace all of the various people out there and who are part of the After School All-Stars network. Embrace what they have to give because these folks really have some expertise in this work, and they not only just have expertise, they have passion for it. And so one of the things that I think the leadership at After School All-Stars has continued to push and advance is the idea of sharing and the idea of being one and seeing the network as an entity that is supporting itself and each other, so that do not feel like you're in an island. Do not feel like you have to do it on your own. Do not feel like you have to reinvent everything on your own. There will be opportunities for you to develop new ideas and new initiatives. But when you're starting out, use the resources that are there. That's why they're there. That's why those people are there. Listen to them. Pick up the phone. Call Aaron. Call BJ. Call Laura in New York. Call Kunshin. Call Emily. Call these people and ask questions because that's what they're there to do, is to answer those questions and help you out. I think what makes After School All-Stars special is that people are opting into it. It's not something that they feel like they have to do or are being told to do. If you look at the staff and you talk to the staff, you recognize these are people who could be doing a lot of different things with their lives. They have a lot of talents, a lot of skills, a lot of credentials. They're choosing to be here. And they're choosing to be here for a reason because they recognize there's an opportunity for them to grow, but there's an opportunity for them to have an impact. And that's what this is about. I think what will make the site that we develop in New York successful is going to be buy-in from the top at the school. You need to have the principal and the leadership behind you 100%. You need them opening the doors for you, and you need them being your voice for people who may not know what After School All-Stars is about, have ever heard of After School All-Stars, and may be a bit resistant, which is natural. You have a new entity inside of a space, and sometimes that can be disruptive. So it's really important to have strong communication from the very beginning, and that communication needs to come from the top. I think that beyond that, we need to have strong parent buy-in.
I think that's one of the consistent challenges across the board is getting parents to be excited about the program, to know about the program. So I would suggest that from the very beginning, finding spaces and ways to make sure that parents are involved and know what's going on, because that's who we're going to be depending on to help make sure that we have students showing up on a daily basis. I think also making sure that that there's dynamic and interesting things for young folks to do on a daily basis. They're not going to want to keep coming back if they feel like it's the same thing day in and day out. You have to, and that requires work. That requires work. So those are some components that I would think that are important for a site.